What's going on, guys? My name is Johnny, and in today's video I want to answer the question of what gear do you need to start photography. So this video is geared more towards the beginner photographers or you guys who are trying to get into photography. And I'm going to try to touch up on a couple gear lists, but realize that each one of these items can have a video in and of itself, so keep that in mind for the future. And as always, I'll leave links in the description for timestamps, so if you already have one of these pieces of gear, feel free to skip around. With that being said, let's go over the very first thing, and that's going to be your camera. Every single photographer needs a camera, and this is honestly a video in and of itself, and I already made a video about it, so check the description and I'll link to that. But just to touch up on it, generally speaking, if you're first starting photography and you don't have a crazy budget, go ahead and stick with a crop sensor. That'll probably suffice for around like 90% of the things that you're going to do. When I first started photography, for like my first 5 years, I used a Nikon D3200. It's some cheap entry-level crop sensor, and I use this for paid gigs. I used it for family shoots, portraits, and even a wedding. Other things to consider though are autofocus. With a cheaper entry-level camera, you will have very crappy autofocus, and sometimes you might have a hard time getting a shot, or you might even miss a shot. But if you're trying to get into weddings or sports photography, really consider getting a camera with good autofocus. Now, if you're somebody who wants to get into like real estate or landscape astrophotography, most of the time you're going to be shooting in manual anyway, so you really don't need to get a camera that has crazy good autofocus. Also, when it comes to cameras, megapixels kind of matter, they kind of don't. In my opinion, the sweet spot is around 20 to 25 megapixels. I personally shoot at 45 megapixels, and that's because I need it for my business and it costs a lot more money, and I can justify it because I shoot landscapes and I blow it up into large prints, or if I'm doing a wedding and my clients request very large prints of their photos, having a 45 megapixel shot will allow for more versatility. I would highly suggest going anything lower than 20 megapixels. Stay away from those like 12 megapixel photos. They just won't do you good enough. But if you're the type of person who's only trying to post stuff on social media, or if you're just trying to view it on a computer monitor, anywhere from like 20 to 25 megapixels is more than good enough. And then the last thing to consider about looking for a camera is the SD card. So cheaper cameras run like an SD card, more expensive ones run like a CF Express or an XQD card. The biggest thing I will say is if you're trying to get into something like weddings, you might want to consider getting a camera that has 2 card slots. Sometimes this will cost you a little bit more money because that type of model will cost more, but in the long run, it's better to spend that extra money than try to explain to your wedding clients how you can't deliver photos because your memory card wiped. So it's really nice to have that backup. So that's enough about cameras. Let's move on to the next one. But before I do, if you guys find this stuff useful, consider hitting that subscribe button. It doesn't cost you anything and it really helps out my channel. So the next one is gonna be lenses. And lenses are another rabbit hole that you could just talk on and on and on and about. There's so many different lenses that you didn't know existed, or you kind of wonder why they even made it. At the end of the day, I would highly suggest considering what type of photography you're gonna do, and then pick a versatile lens for that type of photography. So to give you an example, if you want to get into like family or portrait type of photography, getting like a medium format lens like a 24 to 70 or a crop sensor equivalent would be really useful for you, because a 70 is going to be able to punch in, get those intimate type of shots, but a 24 will zoom out enough to where if they have a bigger or larger family, you can get everyone in the shot without having to change up your lenses. I know when you first start, you hear of lenses like primes or the nifty 50, and those stuff are great and they definitely have their place. But in my opinion, if you're trying to get somewhere with photography and you're just starting out, having one lens that can do multiple things will serve you better in the long run. And then as your business starts making more money or your side hustle generates more income, then go ahead and diversify your lenses. And likewise, if you're someone who's trying to get into like real estate, architectural photography, or landscapes, you don't need some high telephoto lens. Stick with like a very ultra wide angle lens. So I personally shoot with a 15 to 30, that's full frame. A similar equivalent for crop sensor would be like the Tokena 11 to 16. You can get that lens for like $300 used, I believe, and that thing will just about get every single shot you need for real estate and landscape. And then finally, if you're doing stuff like sports or weddings where you can't be right in front of the guests and you have to stand a bit far, you need a telephoto lens. So having something like a 70 to 200 millimeter or the crop sensor equivalent will really help you out. In those instances, a nifty 50 won't do you good if you can't get close to your subject. So really consider the type of photography you're doing and then get the appropriate lens for that. The next thing I want to be talking about is a tripod. A lot of people associate a photographer or a camera with a tripod, but truth be told, you're really not going to be using it unless you do a specific type of photography. So if you're the type of person who shoots weddings or portraits or families, most of the time you're going to be running and gunning, you're going to be changing angles, changing your composition, and you don't have time to be changing the level on your tripod. So you'll just be doing everything handheld. Now, if you're planning on doing astrophotography or real estate photography, a tripod is absolutely crucial. You can't take those type of shots without having a stabilized camera. Same thing goes for landscapes and so on and so forth. Essentially, as a rule of thumb, in my opinion, if you're shooting subjects like people, you're probably not going to be using a tripod. Something to consider though, if you are able to get a tripod, is the ones that can turn into a monopod. I've used that many times during my weddings. So it's a lot less clunky than a full-on tripod, and it gives you a little bit more stability and portability than a tripod does. The last piece of gear I want to touch on is light manipulation devices. Now that sounds really fancy, but I kind of just bunched everything that can change up light in your scene into one category. So this includes everything from like flashes to reflectors. So if you're doing stuff like real estate and there's not much ambient light going into your home, you really need to be able to create that light, and having an external flash or a pop flash will really help you out, especially if you're trying to get into like flambient photography. Also, if you're doing portraits and you want to be able to control the lighting more, having external lights will really help you out. Now, if you're doing outdoor type of shoots and you can't have those external lights with you, say you don't have the money to afford expensive ones, having a reflector panel will serve you just as well. That stuff is really good for if the time of day is not optimal and you have to soften the light on your subject's face, the shadow's too harsh or whatever. Being able to control and manipulate that light will really elevate your photography to the next level. But yeah guys, so when it comes to photography, you really just need these bare basic things. The stuff we went over was you need a camera, you need a lens that goes with the camera to kind of complement the type of photography you're doing. If you're doing like landscapes or real estate, you're gonna want a tripod. And if you're doing like family shoots or sports, a monopod will be really good as well. And then finally, a light manipulation device, whether that's a speed light or reflector panel, just something to help you control light better in case the ambient light just isn't working in your favor. There's obviously so much more gear that you can get as you grow in your photography career, but I would say at the bare minimum, you really do need these pieces of equipment. So that's about it for the video, guys. And like I said before, each one of these pieces of gear can be a video in and of itself. And I do plan on making a video for each one in the future. So if that's something you're interested in, consider hitting that subscribe button and that bell notification. That way you get notified when it comes out. Thank you guys for watching. See you.